life is too short. You could be a worm. Get a C6. This is my 2007 Citroen C6 2.7 HDI exclusive. This is a car that I have owned today, being today is the 18th of September, for 5 years. In April 2022, I did a sort of basic, stood next to the car talking for ages type video about the C6, about why I bought it and some of the issues that are wrong with it and everything. And that video is still on the channel. It's in one of the corners somewhere at the moment. And this is the thumbnail for it. See, I'm helping myself edit in advance. That video did unexpectedly well. For me, that's big numbers. Now that isn't the goal today. The goal today is to kind of revisit the car because it has been kind of dormant for a little while and talk about why it's still here, the issues I've had with it, how it came about, what I'm going to do in the future, and why I think I've been conned. So the car came about in 2020. September 2020 is when I got it. We were in lockdown. Basically, the chap who owned this car advertised it on Facebook, of all places, and said it needs a lot of work and I would rather it went to someone who's going to do the work and sell it to them cheap to make it worthwhile, to make it viable, rather than trying to sell it for a little bit more on eBay and it go to a breaker, more than likely getting shipped off to Europe somewhere. I was the person who ended up taking the car on. I paid 750 quid for it, which at the time was cheap. That was a very cheap car. In fact, I think it was the cheapest C6 I'd ever seen at that point. Since then, I've seen a C6 actually given away for free. So it's not quite so cheap anymore, but this was 5 years ago. He wanted the car to go somewhere where he felt they should do something with it. The person was going to do something meaningful with it, rather than just someone break it for parts and make a quick buck off it. He himself admitted he was stretching himself to run this car, and it probably hadn't had the pampered life it should have had. But I respected it, and I respect it now, because at the end of the day, life is short. And if you're going to push yourself to the limit to own a car that you really see as a dream kind of car, go for it, do it. So when the car came to me, it had about 153,000 miles on it, I think. It's now got about 166,000 miles on it, so I've done about 13,141 miles, I think. I've done it in the time I've had it, and I've had some good times. I've had some very, very good times. When I bought the car off him, it had three main issues that were preventing it from going through an MOT. They were the non-functioning handbrake, which is an electric parking brake in this car. It uses a motor on the back axle and pulls on cables. That was broken. I managed to fix this for about 50 quid. I bought a second-hand motor unit with second-hand cables that weren't seized up. And then I fitted that and resynced it and everything with Diagbox. I downloaded Diagbox from my laptop and resank. I resank the handbrake and everything, got it work, and it was good. Another issue was that it had a suspension fault. The suspension just used to say suspension faulty, and it would go into kind of like a limp mode for the suspension. How many cars do you know that have a limp mode for the suspension? Well, this car does. Basically, the issue with the car is that it didn't know how high it was from the ground, and therefore had to go into a default setting where it was a little bit firmer and a little bit higher, because it didn't know exactly what its ride height was, and it didn't want to risk hitting the ground. It's basically a fail-safe mode that they engineer into the cars. So that's why it was doing what it was doing. It still drive. It would, for the first 30 seconds of a journey, it would drive quite nicely, nice and smooth, and then it would go belly up. And it wasn't horrendous, but it was like, I don't know, an Audi or something like that. It just suddenly went firm, like sporty. It kind of ruined it a little bit. It ruined the waft. The third issue, and the most pressing issue on the car, was the gearbox. The car it didn't like pulling away. It used to stall if you put it in reverse with your foot on the brake. So you have to take your foot off the brake if you put it in reverse, because it will just go. That progressively got worse in first gear as the car warmed up, as the gearbox warmed up. And then after a little while, you're talking a journey of about 10-15 minutes, it would start slamming from second gear into third. It would hang quite badly, and then there'd be a delay while the revs went up, and all of a sudden it would come in with an almighty thunk, and off it would go. So that was the other issue. There were three main issues. There were some other faults. The aircon wasn't working. There were some bulbs out. There was little bits. It was a bit tatty. It still is a bit tatty. But for the most part, that was the main three things. I fixed the handbrake, as I say, with a used unit. The suspension was the easiest thing to fix, because having Diag Box, which is the proper Citroen software, where you log into it with a laptop and everything, allowed me to check on the ride heights of the car on all four corners, because the car has to be, the suspension has to know how high the car is from the ground in order to allow itself to make its manipulations. Well, I didn't know that, basically, because there's a bracket on each suspension arm, kind of like what you would have on a car with xenon headlights, which this does also have, but it doesn't need xenon headlight brackets because it has suspension that does it already. Yeah, it's that kind of thing. It's a sort of a little tiny ball joint with a little electronic sensor on each suspension arm, and it had been through two Citroen specialists, and one of them had put the wrong size bolt in the bracket and seemingly bent the bracket, which meant that this wheel here thought it was 60mm underground. So once I'd figured that out, I could still buy the brackets from Citroen. They were about £9 each. So I put two new brackets on the front. I didn't even use the rear ones in the end. I think I've still got them wrapped up somewhere. Resunk the suspension and everything. Tickety-boo. The gearbox was a slightly trickier one. I did buy a used gearbox, 500 quid I spent on that. And I still haven't fitted it. It's behind you now. I did take the valve box out of it, or the valve body, valve chest, whatever you want to call it, valve block, out of that gearbox and swap it with this one, and eliminated half of the problems. So the problems of it hanging between gears, which was, to be fair, that was the worst problem. I managed to eliminate that. So it seems the car has two problems. It had an issue with the valve block, which is now sorted, and it had an issue, I think, with the torque converter. I think the torque converter is locked up, basically, and that means that when you go to pull away in this car, there is no slip. You are effectively pulling away from tick over with no clutch slip effect in a car that weighs nearly 2 tons. So you can imagine it doesn't get away, well, it gets away like a dry slug, basically. It's horrendous off the line. Once it's moving, it's not too bad. That was 5 years ago. The suspension's been absolutely fine. No issues with the suspension. I think the only issue with the suspension ever since then has been, well, really, I think the spheres are going a bit flat. They last a lot longer in these cars with the LDS systems than they do in the earlier cars with the LHM systems and the green balls. This one's got grey balls. It's obviously aging. Basically, I think they do lose gas over time very slowly, way more slowly than the green cars. I think that's what's happened. I think it is very, very slightly down on gas, which means the ride is very, very slightly stiffer. Not much, it's still very wafty, but crucially, this car has active damping. It detects what the wheels are doing at the front, it profiles bumps that they go over, and then sets the back at the right settings it deems needed to go over the bump. But if the one rigid mechanical part, i.e. the amount of gas in the sphere, is different, all those parameters go out the window. So I think that could be why the car is a little bit like this. Now, I've driven other C6s that are worse than this. I've also driven one that was better. So, not hugely so. It doesn't ride like an XM or something like that. It just isn't that soft. It's a more modern car with bigger wheels and much smaller arch clearances and everything. It can't have the long travel suspension that the old Citroens used to have, like Ds and BXs and things like that. Unfortunately, this car has to do it all. It has to look cool and be smooth. That's quite difficult. So yeah, other than sorting those brackets out and changing the suspension bushes, I've fitted poly bushes all round. No, poly bushes on the front. I haven't put the rear ones in. I've fitted them on the front. I've reset some bit. I've done lots of work on it. You've seen the videos. There's a lot of videos on this thing. And basically, the suspension ever since then has been great. So if I wanted to make it perfect, I'd take the spheres off and send them away and get them regassed, because I haven't got the facilities to do that. I'd get them recharged, back up to the pressures they're supposed to be, and put them back on. And in theory, it would drive like, well, ride like a C6 should. And in doing all this work on the car and buying it and kind of effectively saving it from scrap, I've enjoyed 5 years of adventures. 5 years of driving. I've only covered 13,000 miles, and I'll explain why that is later on. But the things I've done have been good. I've taken the car to France twice. One of those times was quite, I enjoyed taking it there both times, but one of those times it was unexpected. Like, as in the morning of the holiday we were going on in a family people carrier, fully loaded with the family, to France, and this thing was parked up, covered in dust in the street, ready to just be left for 2 weeks or whatever it was. And we're on our way to the Eurotunnel, and the family people carrier starts misfiring and playing up. What do? Do you continue? Do we want to drive this car to another country, but the train is in 2 hours or something like that? And the kids are all excited about going on holiday. Everyone needs the holiday. The weather's good. Do you abandon the holiday? Do you hire a car? Or do you drive home and pick up your £750 C6 and then drive it to France, drive to Rouen, then drive from there down to, how do you say it, Vendy, down below Brittany, down on the coast, all the way down there for a few days, and then come back up through Le Mans, and then all the way back across, north of Paris, back up towards the Belgian border, and then drive all the way home, via Bruges, and the Netherlands, covering some crazy amount of miles in the space of like a few days. Would you do that? Well, that's what we did. It was 36-degree heat, the aircon didn't work, going down the French autoroutes at about 140k, all the windows down. One of the best memories I've had in cars, I think. I mean, when we were driving to the tunnel, I have to be honest, when we were going back to get this car, when we made that decision, there was a part of me, although everyone was freaking out, there was a part of me inside that was devilishly excited. Devilishly excited. In fact, I think it was Becca on the podcast, on the Passenger Seat podcast. She replied something which made me laugh, and I always remember it. She says, "Oh, your MPV broke down on the way, and you had to take your C6 to France. That's so inconvenient," or something along those lines. It wasn't engineered, genuinely, that this was the only other car we could have taken. And it was actually a squeeze, because to get 3 people across the back in this is really difficult. It's actually quite cramped, like it's a 2+2. So, yeah, it ended up being one of the best memories, driving down the Champs-Elysees in Paris, over all the cobbled streets, sitting on the motorways, or the autoroutes, or whatever you call them. It was just the best. And on the way down there, I was very excited, and I was also thinking, oh, I'm going to be treated like royalty when I get off the train. I'm in a C6. They're going to think I'm some sort of government dignitary or something really cool, and everyone will get out of my way on the motorway. They did not give a shite. They don't care less. Doesn't matter. You still get a clear on your ass if you're not going fast enough by their reckoning. And then we took it round. It's been round the Le Mans circuit. When we went through Le Mans, we went to the museum, and then we done sort of Mulsanne Straight and everything like that. And yeah, just bombing around the French countryside, and it was just something special. And we went back there, took it to Paris again about a year later, I think it was, or 2 years later. And there's something very cool about this car, where you can just, when you drive through Paris, because it is a little tatty. It's damaged here. I don't know if that one, I don't think it was that corner. I think it's the opposite corner that I took out a bollard on the Channel Tunnel train. They're in a stupid place, really. You can't see them. So because it is a little marked, you drive through Paris, like, you don't care. It's really freeing. You just hurl it onto the, what's the Arc de Triomphe, the roundabout. Just throw it on. If you want a lane, just pick a lane. Just cut. You just become a Parisian for the day, even though you're from Hampshire, and it works. No one beeps you. Everyone, you just do what you just when in Rome, or when in Paris, do as the Parisians do. You just drive like them, and it worked beautifully at that. You could just cut people up, and no one got the ump. I think they would do if you were in like a BMW off-roader, or well, they're not off-roaders, are they? SUV or whatever. I think if you were in something like that, they probably would get a little bit touchy. But this, it was like, just do what they do. It was just, yeah, it was a really good memory. I really got fond memories of driving this thing around in France. That's probably my best memory with the car, actually. Trying to drive it on 3 wheels unsuccessfully, probably not. That was another video. Working on it, no, that's not one of the best memories. That's not a good memory at all. So in terms of working on it, in terms of the issues I've had, a £750 C6, is that a recipe for disaster? Honestly speaking, no. Now don't get me wrong, the car does go wrong a lot. It does go wrong a lot. But I don't think that's because it's a Citroen C6, let alone a £750 Citroen C6. I think what it is components don't last forever. Some components last a long time, but a manufacturer has a design life for components. It has an amount of time that it wants its components to last, and that's basically long enough so that it's out the warranty period, then you go back and buy another one. They're not interested in making cars last forever, so they're not engineered to last forever. No car is engineered to last forever. It's just that some manufacturers happen to make cars that almost felt like they would last forever, like old Mercs and old Volvos and things like that. The thing with this car is that there's nothing on it. It's not like it's got nothing silly about it. There's nothing silly on this car like Mercedes with their biodegradable wiring looms, or Land Rover with their wiring looms that went through the oil in the engine and all this stupid stuff. Nothing like that. There's nothing on this car that is poorly designed, necessarily. People with the Lion V6 engine will laugh at that if they've got a Land Rover, but that problem with snapping crankshafts, it doesn't happen in these, because they don't drive a stupidly heavy, big off-roader. Put it in a front-wheel drive car like it's designed for, fine. I don't know of a single C6 that snaps a crankshaft. I wouldn't say it's been an unreliable car. I've had to do a lot of work. It does go wrong a lot. So you think you certainly sound like it's an unreliable car. It's done 160,000 miles. So I've had to replace the radiator, and I've had to replace the aircon condenser on the front, like you do on any car if you want the aircon to work and it's gone past a certain mileage. Is that unreliable? Suspension bushes. I've had to do suspension bushes. I've had to do all sorts. Brakes. Intake pipe, that was split because there's a lot of cheap crap plastic on the engine. There's been no issues with the suspension. The electrics on the whole are good. There's only 2 issues with the car electric wise. One of them is the mirrors, the what do you call it, indexing mirrors, the ones where you put it in reverse and they look down at the curb, which is a lovely idea, except on this car it just looks around all over the place, like it's just in the sky. Oh, over there suddenly. I don't know what causes that. And the mirrors blow as well. I've got a C5 glass on the other side, but the original C6 auto dimming one on this side, and they blow and they go all funny and rainbow tinted. So yeah, that's one issue it has. And the other issue is the steering wheel buttons, the cruise control and the speed limiter, which works really well when it works, because there's a connector under the steering column apparently, which plays up, and I haven't actually done anything with it yet. That's really... Oh, and that window at the back. That I'm going, oh, like there's nothing wrong with it. Oh, actually, and there's this. No, and that window there. So the yeah, that's got a mind of its own. If you try and put that up for the first couple of attempts, it'll just do what the hell it wants before eventually going, oh, okay, I'll go up. Other than that, honestly, I don't think it has been troublesome. I know it sounds like it's been troublesome because I'm listening to all these things that don't work on it, but let's look at this stuff in context. The suspension issue it had was not the car's fault. That's because someone had bent a bracket. And if you don't take these cars to specialists, people who know the cars, then they are going to do stuff like that. And the gearbox issue, well, that's a Japanese gearbox. It's an ACIN gearbox. And the fault of the gearbox there is the fact that they say they're sealed for life. Nothing is sealed for life. If it's got fluid in it, it's not sealed for life. So basically, if you don't service it and you just leave it, it will go wrong. And that's what happened with this one. So I'm not holding that against the car. On the whole, it has been... It's going to sound crazy saying this and people are going to laugh at me. It has been reliable. It has been reliable. It's never left me stranded. It's just, it develops niggles, it develops faults, and they're all down to age. And any car would do the same. And go through periods where it needs a lot of stuff being replaced, and that's when, you know, is a car viable, is it not? It's that kind of thing. With this car, there's so much on it, there's so much equipment on it, that when that stuff comes at you, it comes at you in waves. There's loads. Like now, if I drive this car down the motorway now, I can't because I've got no tax. But if I did drive down the motorway now, the alternator will throw a warning because the freewheel clutch, I think it's the freewheel clutch on the front of it, I don't know, but I think it is starting to stick. Basically, I don't think there's anything on the car that I would say is the car's fault necessarily. I would say an unreliable car is a car where the whole design, the engineering, everything like behind it is faulty, is troublesome, is not well executed, and the car suffers from reliability issues as a result. To be honest with you, you don't get many cars like that anymore because most cars are, for the most part, sorted. This is no exception. Then that brings you onto the issue of working on it. Working on this car is horrendous. It is awful to work on. It is the worst engine bay I've ever worked on. Like hands down. Hands down. The worst engine bay I've ever worked on. There's no room to do anything. Rear EGR valve, forget it. I've had it mapped out. It's just everything on it is an absolute nightmare to get to. The issue is that if anything does happen to go belly up on it, it becomes an absolute nightmare to work on it. And it has at times nearly broken me working on it. I've just got to the point where I just don't need this. I mean, I've got a Vauxhall Zafira outside as a comparison, and I can open the bonnet on it and I can see the ground around the engine. That does not happen on this. You cannot see the ground, even if the under tray was missing, which is not. The under tray is in there. But if the under tray was missing, you still wouldn't be able to see the ground. It is a joke to work on. It's awful. It is by far the hardest car I've ever worked on. And I've worked on some pretty hard cars, but this is pretty much up there. I've never worked on a Phaeton, a Volkswagen Phaeton, but I imagine it's a similar sort of deal. But do I regret any of it? No. Not even slightly. Don't regret it one bit. If I could go back to September 2020 and put the mask on and be in lockdown and do it all over again and get offered a C6 for 750 quid, would I take it? Yes. 100%. If someone offers you a Citroen C6 for 750 quid and you can do a bit of spannering yourself and you are a methodical kind of person who can like take your time and learn how something works, yeah, absolutely do it. Go for it. Because look at it. I mean, this one is beat to death and it just looks so great. I love it. It still feels special now, even when you drive down the road in it. Even all these years later, the C6 this year, this is 2025, the C6 as a car is 20 years old. That is a 20-year-old design. In fact, it's not. The concept car that's based on is actually 26 years old. But that's a 20-year-old car. We watched the Top Gear when he raced it against the BMW. No, didn't race it. He did a horse racing challenge, didn't he, with a camera on the roof on Top Gear. 20 years ago. You feel old now? It's I absolutely no regrets whatsoever. None. If you have the opportunity to get one of these for under £1,000, it's still a steal. It's still a bargain. Even if you have it for a year and just say, I had one. Because when you get to your deathbed, when you're an old person hopefully, and you're laying on your deathbed, and someone says, oh, what are your regrets? And if you suddenly lay there and went, oh, I never owned a C6. You don't want that, do you? So no, absolutely no regrets. The memory I had taking it to France in, I think it was 2022. We went to France in it with the family. It's honestly one of my favourite family memories and my favourite holiday to date. Just bombing around it, stupidly hot, all the windows open, aircon doesn't work, people getting properly rolled up, 3 teenagers in the back getting the ump because they haven't got enough space because the middle seat is basically a jump seat. A wife who's rattled because the car we were supposed to take broke and everything that was packed into it. And that was an MPV that was packed really high. And then you have to get home and take all that stuff out and pack it into this, which has way less space in the back. It was just one of my favourite holidays. I absolutely loved driving this in France and I would like to do it again one day. But the question is, will I do it again? What's going to happen with the C6 now? Well, I honestly don't know. There's quite a simple reason for that, and that is running costs. The fact that the car is temperamental, again, I will stress, I believe, not because it's an unreliable car, not, but it is the fact that it's a complex car, but it's not complexity going wrong, it's all those components aging. And as soon as they start aging, that complexity that needs all these components working means that certain components don't work properly and certain systems start playing up. And when you've got a car as complicated as this, that starts making a difference. It's not an unreliable car, but you can't rely on it. Does that make sense? It's well engineered, it's reliable, but as a car, as a 160,000 mile, nearly 20-year-old complex machine like this, which was nearly 40 grand new, you also can't take it to any old garage to work on, because they'll bend the suspension bracket, or they'll do this had the wrong wishbones fitted to it. It still has, actually. It's still got Peugeot 407 wishbones fitted to it. It's just the bushes are a different pitch, so it changes the angle, the axis of the pivot on the front suspension. So I made some spacers to jack it back up. Other than that, they are the same wishbones. So yeah, from that point of view, it's not an easy car to own. Otherwise, I would use it more if it were not for the fact that I am being bummed by the government. That took a turn, I'll explain. My issue with the car, the biggest issue with the car, is the costs to run it. It's not a cheap car to run. The economy on it is not amazing. That said, in fairness to the car, if I was to drive this car around town and use it for this kind of driving that I normally do, I'm lucky to get 30 to the gallon out of a diesel. That's not good. But in fairness to the car, the sort of driving I was doing does not suit the car. It doesn't like it. It's not made for it. That short stop-start town driving, 4 miles each way every day, barely getting a chance to warm up in a diesel. You end up blocked up DPF, you have blocked up EGR valves. The inlet manifold in this is so coked up, I'm convinced of this. I don't know if I'm wrong or right yet, but I've had this on the rollers. It's supposed to be 200 odd horsepower, kicking out 170. And I think it's because the inlet manifold is just completely blocked. The map sensor started playing up the other day, and when I took the map sensor out, it came out with a long black straw on the end of it of carbon. It's generally not a good sign. So I think the inlet manifold needs to come off and be soaked or blasted with walnuts inside or something like that. I don't know how you clean an inlet manifold, but I imagine, having seen cylinder heads the way they are on some cars, this is probably along those lines. It probably is massively coated up. Even in the heads it probably is, but at least you can be a bit more aggressive in the heads with some cleaning equipment. So yeah, I don't use it because it's not particularly suited to the driving I'm doing. Where you should use it on the motorways and things, and the journeys that this car is designed for, you'll get over 40 to the gallon. It won't coke up. It won't become unhappy because it's designed to do that sort of thing. But no, that isn't the reason. The reason I'm being conned, quite simply, is the road tax, or vehicle excise duty. To tax this car every year, I don't even know. In fact, you know what? I've got another phone with me. Vehicle tax rates. To tax this car, you ready? £760 a year. If I weigh up how many miles this car has done, it's about, what, 13,000. And if you add up the amount of grams of carbon or CO2 or whatever they're basing it on that's come out of the exhaust in 13,000 miles, and compare that to a £35 a year Ford Fiesta, a car that's £35 a year to tax, not 760, but one that does 20,000 miles a year, or even 12,000 miles a year. In the time I've had this, that car's done between 50 and 100,000 miles. How many grams of crap that they're measuring has come out the back of that car compared to this one? The reason this car is so difficult to use, and the reason why the values of them are so low, and the rate of attrition will become so high, is quite simply because they're being conned out of being used. We don't operate a fair VED system in this country. In this country, a car that was made between 2001 and 2017, they take the amount of CO2 it emits out the exhaust in the laboratory. And if it's above a certain amount per kilometre, I think it's 250 grams. If it goes over a certain amount, that governs how much they're going to charge you per month. And you can have a car that goes, emits 100 grams per unit of distance, kilometre or whatever, more than another one, and it become like 3 times as much to tax it per year. And it's just massively unfair, because a fair system would be to have a rate at which a certain car is chargeable, to have a base rate, and then have it multiplied by all the miles covered, or pre-purchase tax, pre-purchase 20,000 miles worth of tax at X rate, and then you use that, and once you've gone beyond that, you're not taxed anymore unless you pay more. It could be checked on the MOT. The MOT is all online now. All the mileages are online. And you could say, well, people could fudge it. People could like clock their cars and make it look like they're not using them as much as they could. Well, yeah, they could. Yeah, they could. Or they could just not tax their car at all, which is what they're doing now. A lot of people will just think, well, there's no point taxing it. I'll just drive without tax. If I get caught, the fine will be cheaper than it would have been, to pay for 6 months' tax. It's a stupid system. And I know that other countries have it bad. I know other countries actually have it worse in some cases, but it's just the most ridiculous system. And the only reason I'm convinced, the only reason they don't change it is because they won't make as much money. Because how many people out there are running a car like this, doing 2, 3, 4,000 miles a year and paying them 700 odd quid a year? And it's going to normally be some kind of monstrosity SUV or something. The sort of person who owns it, to them 700 quid a year is nothing. They just pay it and don't think about it. So the government's got their nice little £760 off them, thanks very much, even though the car doesn't get used very much. If they switch to a fair by mile system, by distance used, and therefore by amount of emissions emitted, because the amount that comes out of the car is directly comparable to the amount of miles it's done, well, then the person paying £760 a year wouldn't be paying £760 a year anymore. They'd be paying a lot less. I genuinely think that successive governments will realise this, and that's why they'll never change it. And that's why this car, a C6, and cars like it from this kind of era that weren't high premium or high performance cars, high badge prestige and stuff like that, they'll just fall by the wayside. A big Citroen already had it up against itself to try and survive this time. Look at XMs. XMs were just worth buttons for ages. They're only just starting to become worth a little bit more now, because again, it's all supply v demand. The less cars there are out there, the more the demand will go up. It's getting that balance. And there are still, even though this is a rare car, they only made 23,000 of them worldwide. That is still a buyer's market, because the amount of people who want one of these is minuscule. There are a hell of a lot of people out there who go, oh, I'd love one of those. There's people watching this video now who go, oh, I'd love a C6. But would you actually buy one? Are you actually in the market for a C6? You're not, are you? You just would like the idea of having one. You're not actually seriously thinking of buying one. No one's going to do it because of the costs. It's just ridiculous. You throw in specialist care and the stupid tax costs, the vehicle excise duty, this car is just unviable. It's not going to be the only car like that, but other cars kind of have their badge to carry them through it. A BMW, whatever, 535D, or some X5 thing, or a Mercedes S-Class with a diesel engine in it, or even a petrol engine in it, They won't be worth huge amounts because they're not the AMG or the M series or an Audi RS6 or whatever. But they'll still be more sellable and still be worth a bit more than one of these, because these kind of cars have it all up against them. It makes me angry. I can't afford to enjoy this car. And yeah, okay, fair enough. You could turn around and say, well, that's your problem. There's plenty of people can't afford to enjoy a 72-inch OLED TV that costs £4,000 because they haven't got £4,000 to buy one. Yes, that is fair enough. That's fair enough. But it's a four-wheel car that costs 750 quid. It's not a £4,000 TV. It's just a car from a fairly lowly manufacturer, not one that's high up on the prestige stakes. So why is it £700 odd a year to tax? It's a con. No one's going to convince me otherwise. And I'm not saying that the government are out specifically against Citroen C6s. There will be a lot of cars out there that fall into the super tax thing. And the stupid thing is that if you get a C6 that's... there are a few, I think, that were on I was going to say C6 people, come in the comments and clarify for me, but I'm supposed to be a C6 person. I think it's 55 plate, or is it 06s? Some of the very, very, very early 06s. There's basically like a month or two before that. Basically, they're not 760, they're like 380 a year or something like that. It's the same car. Yeah, they cost more to tax. And the future of this car, for me, I don't know. What do I do with it? All it does is spend its time sitting around here. Every now and then I'll have it on the road. We had it on the road earlier this year for a funeral, because it's a bit funeral-y, and it did a good job. I took it up to Cirencester earlier in the year. Got given a Peugeot 206 by a very kind viewer, which has been given to my son, one of my sons. And we had to have a car. No, it wasn't Cirencester. I'm talking shite. It was Stratford. It was near Stratford. And the only car that I wanted to go up the A34 in was that, because the A34 is a hellishly tedious road to drive on, and that made it bearable. This is, by some margin, that is the best motorway car I've ever driven. It's a cheat code on motorways. It's ridiculous. It's like, do you know what it reminds me of, right? So we're going to go into train talk very briefly here, and you're going to realise that I'm quite limited on my knowledge of train talk. We had trains round here that were called a Wessex electric. I think they're called a Class 442. And I remember that because it sounds like a football formation. And they had a record. They were like the fastest electric third rail driven train, because they can do over 100 with a third rail. I think that's what it is. Train people. I'm not a train person particularly. Train people, tell me, am I wrong or right? And this car reminds me of that, because one of the first things I ever noticed when I went in one of them, and it would have been in early 90s that I went in one, was the trains we had around here at the time were the old slam door electric trains, rickety things from the 50s or 60s, I'm guessing. And then these Wessex electrics came out, and we used to get a train from Eastleigh to Southampton, and it had its electric doors and everything, hydraulic pneumatic doors or whatever. And when you got in them and you looked out the window, you couldn't hear anything. You couldn't hear the motors, you couldn't feel anything. We went over the joins in the track, you could hear it, but you couldn't really feel it. And when they got up to speed, there was no noise. You just looked out the window and everything was just, the scenery's just going past. But there's nothing else. It's kind of like, am I just watching a telly with scenery on it? What gives? And I always like those trains for that. They've been taken out of service. I think most of them are being scrapped. And I don't think any of them are being saved, which is really sad. But I really like those. And that's what this reminds me of. Because when you go on a motorway, it's literally just, you just get in it and you put cruise control on and you sit there with a good stereo, amazing aircon, and you just wait and watch the world go by, react occasionally to some dickhead, and then you're there. And you get out as fresh as you got in. I've not driven anything else that can do this. And you could, even old Citroens, you know, yeah, they've got the ride, they've got the seat comfort, but they haven't got the refinement, they haven't got the noise. You know, the NVH is just off the chart. They're too loud, they're too noisy, they're too old, basically. And this isn't. I mean, the NVH in this isn't, it's not biblical, it's not off the chart. I have driven recently a people carrier from Volkswagen, which is better than this, and it's the same kind of age, and it's just quieter. It just rolls along more quietly. The tyres are quieter. Everything is just well more insulated, more damped than this. So it is still a Citroen from that point of view, but for a Citroen, for a French car, it is epically refined and well put together. It's just not quite there on the German or Japanese levels, but it's a pretty good effort. And so, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Occasionally someone asks, they ask if I'd sell it, and I think really, the reality is, yeah, if the right person came along, probably, because what's it doing? But the thing is, it's not worth much. I couldn't give it away. Even if I could afford to give it away, I couldn't. I love it too much. I have too many good memories with this car, and I know if it goes anywhere, it will likely end up being bean cans. People who want a C6 can just go and buy a tidier one for, you know, not a lot more money. And unless you're one of these jokers asking 10 grand for them, the reality is you can buy a fairly decent one for about 4,000, all done, sorted. If you bought this, even if you bought this for 1,000 off me now, with everything I've done on it, you'd spend more than the 4,000 taking it somewhere to get the gearbox sorted out and all the other little bits and bobs done. I don't know what to do with it. I know what I will do. I'll answer a couple of questions before I sign off. I put out some messages earlier on social media, and I basically said to people, ask me some questions about C6 ownership experience, and I will reply to them, probably. Channel member Phil asks a question on Instagram. This was, he said, apart from the road tax, which is best described as reassuringly expensive, apart from the road tax, that would you change? I think he means what would you change? I think that's what he means. What would I change? I would prefer it didn't have a diesel engine. I prefer I had the petrol, because the diesel was. I've driven petrol ones. I've got a video, head-to-head video on here. I'll link to it. And that was this car versus a petrol C6. And for all the things this car did, this was faster once they were moving, not off the spot because this one's broken, but faster, overtaking, better on fuel. Much cheaper to buy because the petrol ones are very rare and you can kind of ask a bit more for those now. But in every other regard, the petrol was much simpler, mechanically way more simple, which shows you how things have changed, doesn't it? Diesels used to be the simple ones. More refined, sounded nice. Overall, yeah, this car but with a petrol engine in it. I went onto Facebook and someone called Marbo, I guess that's a fake name, would I actually recommend C6 ownership? Yeah, well, yes and no, actually. It depends on what you're paying for it. But on the whole, if you had a gun to my head and it was just everything else out of the equation, yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd recommend it. It's one of those special cars. If you're into that kind of thing, that's one of those cars, isn't it? Even if it's not a C6, just life's too short. Life is far too short. You're not going to get a second go at it. And even if you did come back reincarnated, you might come back as a worm. Life is too short. You could be a worm. Get a C6. My mate Andy says, does it annoy me that the Chevy Corvette C6 sold nearly 10 times as many units and dominates the search results for C6? No, it doesn't. Patrick Crean says, do I feel like an assassin when I drive it? The answer to that is no. No, I think in that came from what Jeremy Clarkson said, doesn't it? Well, he talks a lot of shit, doesn't he? Let's be honest. The real world, an assassin would drive something very understated and completely unremarkable and something that doesn't stand out. Even like some people who don't really know much about cars would see that and kind of remember it slightly. They would just drive a 3 Series or something, or they would just have something normal in real life. In the movies, in fiction, yeah, they probably would have something like this. It is a bit more, a dark coloured Citroen is sort of a bit of an assassin's car, but in real life, I don't think it is at all. So I don't feel like an assassin. When I drive it, what do I feel like? A bit of a bellend for paying £70 a month in tax, really. We have a question from Sid3300. He says, 2 questions in brackets, sorry. Oh, it's cut his question off, but I think I can get the gist of his question. If I was back in 2005 and given the money to buy any spec of C6, would I still go for the 2.7 diesel, or would I have gone for a petrol V6? I think I've answered that one already. I'd go for a petrol. I've only got the 2.7 because it's the one out there. You can get the 2.2s. They're pretty rare. I think the 2.2 would be a more sensible car. Certainly cheaper to tax. And easier to work on, but it doesn't have the variable damping. And there's something about having the 6-cylinder engine that suits the car. I think it would just be a bit tractor-like with a 2.2. The power overlap, if you like, on a 6-cylinder engine is just, it's addictive. No, for me, despite the lack of higher up performance, they are a bit flat. Above kind of 60 mile an hour, the V6 petrol, just a basic naturally aspirated 200 odd horsepower V6. I'd get one of those. And then he says, or would I say sod the Citroen and have gotten a Peugeot 607? Absolutely not. They're big ugly. Hugo Stran says, my question is, well, one of them, with the 2.2, would it still be considered an unreliable car? I've noticed many of the issues you've had with yours aren't related to the V6 or its packaging, but other elements of the car, such as the electricals. Well, I think I've covered that, to be honest with you. I don't think the car is particularly an unreliable car. I don't think it would be much different with a 2.2. It was a more simple car. There is a little less to go wrong. If you have a manual gearbox in it, then obviously you don't have the gearbox issues. But then if you have a manual gearbox, it just doesn't suit a C6. I can't imagine that car with a manual. I'm someone who likes manual gearboxes. I prefer them, but I can't imagine one of those with a manual. It would ruin it. It needs to be an auto. It needs to be you need to remove yourself from the driving experience as much as possible. That's its USP. The fact it just wafts you along in complete comfort. And I think if I'm to faff about with my left foot, that's not complete comfort anymore. When I drive that, I slip my shoe off. No, I wouldn't go for it. I don't know if I'd go for a 2.2. I possibly would. But I've heard they don't ride. The ride isn't quite the same as it is with these. Or it's probably more the handling, actually, isn't quite the same as it is with these. This is the thing. This can be hustled. For its size, it really can. It really can be hustled A to B across country. You wouldn't assume so, but you can. Like most hydro Citroens, you don't have to slow down. You can just attack, but like in a refined way. I don't know if the 2.2 would be the same. I'd have to drive one. I've never driven a 2.2. I've driven 2.7. Have I driven a 3 litre? No, I don't think so. But I've driven petrol as well. So a 3 litre is largely the same car. I think it's just a bit more refined feeling because it's, slightly updated and slightly improved version of the same engine. So it's, although for some reason, but they got stupid ugly mirrors. They got huge mirrors on them. It kind of ruins the look a little bit. Those wheels are off the 3 litre HDI. Also, a question someone already asked, but I'd like to expand upon. Say it's 2006 and you're in the market for an executive car. Would you have chosen the C6 over an E65 series, for example, with their excellent and bulletproof M47 and M57 diesel engines? You were a BMW salesman or something, since most C6s themselves are also diesels. To be honest, I'm not really the person to answer it because I wouldn't have bought an executive car full stop. I only got this because it came up very cheap and it's one of those cars that I always liked when they first came out. I always thought, I'd love one of those because I'm a bit of a Citroen nut. I like my old Citroens. So to have one that was kind of almost a bit, no, it's not DS-like, but to have one that had the lineage of the DS and have it modern enough to be able to use it every day with the comfort and everything that it brought and the fact that it would just be cool just to do things in it, have adventures in it. That's why I did it. But I wouldn't have bought a 5 Series or an E-Class or anything. This is the only car of this size I've ever owned, an executive car. I've never had an XM. I'll probably have to have one day, but I've never had an XM. This is the only car in this class I've ever had. So that says everything, doesn't it? Most of the cars I have are smaller. Someone's name is at J14PHE. I've always liked the C6. I've never owned a Citroen, but have driven plenty and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I've currently got a year-old Cougar, commiserations, and a 21-year-old SL. That is his guilty pleasure and tinkering fun. Mercedes? My question is, what is the biggest issue? Will it be mechanical or electrics that ends the fun of the C6? For me, I think it will be electrics that limits the life of a great SL. I think he's talking about a Merc, isn't he? Yeah, probably a similar sort of thing, actually, isn't it? Certainly on Mercedes it will be, because although people slag off French electrics and things, Mercedes from this era are worse for electrics than that. So, yeah, you will have electrical problems with one of those. John, your friend from Glasgow. Thank you, John. I think it's a combination. It's going to be a combination of this could be a whole other video, but I think the issue with classic cars is that cars survive longer these days. So if you had a classic, if you were in 1990 and you bought a classic car, it could be a car from 1970 or 1965, whatever. The amount of cars from 1965 that would still survive at that time, bearing in mind that would be a 25-year-old car, would be lower than a 25-year-old car today. A 25-year-old car today is a car from the year 2000. That's not far off that. There's a Saxo outside that's from the year 2000. There's Antia behind it that's from 1996. or might even be 1995. Yeah, it is a 1995 build. I'm surrounded by older cars, but my point is that the amount of cars that can survive that time frame, the amount of cars that can continue into old age, is increasing. People go, oh, they don't build them like they used to, and like they're slagging off everything that's new and saying the old cars are better and that. They don't build them like they used to. No, they don't, because old cars used to rust into the floor and fall apart after 100,000 miles. They were simple, they were easy to work on, and in some cases you got cars like a Mercedes, like a 123 shape Mercedes, or 124, that Mercedes SL, the what's it, the saloon like Hubnut did the other day. You just look at Mercedes from that era and you think they offered something that other manufacturers didn't offer. These are special cars. They were few and far between. Most cars were just like Mark III Escorts and things, Mark II Escorts, Vivas, all that kind of thing. They don't last as long as cars do now. You could see, if you had a Nissan Almera from the year 2000, the only reason people would get rid of it now is because it's rusted, or they just didn't want it anymore and gave it away. And I think now you've got more cars surviving that are 25 years as a given age, more 25-year-old cars surviving now than you used to, which means your pool of old classic cars is getting bigger. And the market values of cars is solely dictated by supply and demand. It's solely dictated by how many people there are that want a car versus how many cars there are out there available for those people. So if more people want one of those cars than they can get their hands on, as with a BX16 valve, as another car I own, a good example, the values of those recently have gone like this. You can now ask £10,000 for one of those cars. I mean, a lot of cars from that era have gone up, but my point is that the number of those cars that are left is only getting smaller. It's not getting bigger unless people import them, which people have actually started to do, but that number is only getting smaller. But the people who want them, the number of people who want one, if anything, is actually getting bigger. So the value of the cars goes up. You've got all these cars out there fighting for attention. You've got all these cars out there that are cars that people are using. The values, or the demand for them, the desire for them, is driven by nostalgia. And that's what drives the prices up. Where does the C6 fit into that? Look at all the things that go against the C6. Nostalgia. No one's nostalgic for a C6 yet, because it doesn't even look that old. It's nearly, the C6 as a design is 20 years old this year. Does that look like a 20-year-old car? I don't think it is. And then there's the running costs. Like I say, the VED, the tax, criminal. That'll put people off. Getting garages to work on it. Everything on that car, the labour time on a lot of jobs is horrendous. The labour time to change the gearbox, I looked at my system a while back, I think it's 14 hours. Book time. Book times are notoriously stingy. 14 hours book time. Real world, that's about 25 hours. Can you imagine 25 hours? At £100 an hour, which some garages will be at now, like me not quite, but some will be, £2,500 plus VAT. I worry for the C6 in general. I think we are going to see a decline in them because we're at the point at the moment where the supply outstrips the demand, and that's why the values are low. And that is the point where you lose cars, and then the demand starts to become higher than the supply, and the values of the cars goes up. But by that point, a lot of nice cars are gone and scrapped, and the C6 is in that point. The C6 is now at that point where they will get scrapped. It's not a war on motorists, it's none of that bollocks. It's supply and demand, and for reasons, be it legislation, be it spare parts availability, because Citroen have washed their hands of them, finding people to work on them. I worry for the C6. Big time. Not just mine, all of them. Happy 20th birthday, C6. And up yours to the government.